Can a president who has already left office be impeached, tried, and convicted by the Senate if you can't remove him from that office? One thing about Trump is that he was impeached or accused by the House of Representatives when he was still the president. Only now his trial will come after he has left office. That's a big distinction. Some academics say you can't impeach or try a president who has left office. Others say that you can impeach him if he's still in office and try him after he's left office. Still more academics argue that it's totally fine to impeach an ex-president and try an ex-president in the Senate. A lot of the arguments for and against impeaching an ex-president are really two sides of the same coin. It's true that the Constitution doesn't explicitly say that you can impeach, try, and convict an ex-president. But then again, the Constitution doesn't say you can't impeach, try, and convict an ex-president. The folks against impeaching an ex-president point to the fact that the Constitution speaks of removing someone from office. And if they're gone, there's nothing to remove that person from. The pro-impeachment folks argue that some states, and even Old England, from where we get our law, understood that you could and sometimes should impeach people after they left office. In fact, around the time the Constitution was being drafted, a famous or infamous impeachment was going on in England of a man named Warren Hastings. Warren Hastings had already left office, but was still being impeached by Parliament. The pro-impeachment folks argue that the framers knew about this impeachment of Hastings, and so they just generally understood that you could impeach someone after they left office. But the anti-impeachment folks point to that same fact and say, look, if the framers knew about Hastings' impeachment, why didn't they just say something about it in our Constitution? The pro-impeachment folks point to two incidents in American history to support the idea that people could be impeached after they leave office. William Belknap was a Secretary of War who tried to resign to avoid impeachment, but the Senate tried him anyway. He wasn't convicted, in part because some senators thought that you couldn't impeach someone after they left office. In the early part of the last century, Judge Robert Archibald was first a federal district judge. Then he was elevated to appeals court judge. The House impeached him on conduct both as a district judge and later as an appeals judge. But at the time he was impeached, Archibald was clearly no longer a district judge. His attorneys made that argument, but the Senate still took the case to trial. Archibald was convicted in the Senate based on his conduct as an appeals court judge, but not his conduct as a district court judge. The reality is, even though impeachment is called a trial, prior Senate decisions on impeachment aren't binding on today's Senate the way prior court decisions are binding on future courts. The Constitution has two explicit punishments for conviction by the Senate. One is mandatory. That's removal from office. But disqualification from future office is a kind of optional penalty. If the officer is convicted, the Senate may, but need not, disqualify that person from future office. An example of this is Alcee Hastings, who was a federal judge who was tried and convicted and removed by the Senate, and who later ran and is currently in the U.S. House of Representatives. The Senate could have, but did not bar Hastings from holding future office. The bottom line is there is no clear answer to this question in the Constitution. We can look at history and practices and traditions, but ultimately, because the Senate is not bound by prior court decisions, it can choose to do whatever a majority or a supermajority decides to do at a particular impeachment trial.
Allison, this is the first full week of the Biden administration, and while President Biden is focused on the coronavirus pandemic, he's also focused on the other crisis, our economic crisis. Today, through executive order, he announced a new initiative around Made in America and Buy American. This is not a new idea. This is an idea people from both sides of the aisle and clearly across the country support. But while the last administration talked a lot and presented a lot about the importance of buying American, we didn't actually see many policies that would change behavior. So what is the Biden administration doing? Well, first things first. Our federal government spends about $600 billion a year buying stuff. They call it federal procurement, whether it's manufactured goods, some services, and a lot of what they buy, and many people complain about it, is not from U.S. companies, not from U.S. manufacturers. And we know U.S. manufacturing has been hurting over the last few decades. So under this new executive order, there will be more transparency and a change in policies. Those waivers that many international businesses are able to get so they can work with our government, a lot of those loopholes will be closed up. There'll be more transparency so other businesses can actually understand the contract bidding process, and they'll be putting more oversight in. A new senior role will be designed under the OMB, so all of this process can work cleaner and better and really add more transparency. When you talk about how do we bring business back, the first place is to do it at home. And the federal government is saying, if we are spending hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer money, let's figure out a way to spend it on American business. Now, that is today's executive order, among other things. The question is, 6 months from now, a year from now, will it make a difference? Only time will tell. Allison?
One out of every 12 jobs in the economy is connected in some way, shape, or form to what happens on the farm.
Tom Vilsack is no stranger to the White House, nor to the role President Biden nominated him for.
For Secretary of Agriculture, I nominate Tom Vilsack, an outstanding two-term governor of Iowa, the best Secretary of Agriculture I believe this country's ever had.
Vilsack was born an orphan in Pittsburgh.
I was adopted into a family where my mom struggled in my early life with prescription drug addiction and alcoholism. You see your parents struggle, and what you want to be as a child is you want to make them happy. Just as they want to make you happy, you want to make them happy. And so at an early age, you become, I think, focused on solving problems for people.
His propensity to solve problems led him to run for class president while attending Hamilton College. After he lost, Vilsack swore he'd never run for office again. He'd meet his wife in college, a native Iowan, and they moved to Mount Pleasant, Iowa, where he practiced law and they raised their 2 sons, Jess and Doug. But in 1987, his political trajectory changed.
The town council meeting in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, ended last night with gunfire. The mayor was killed.
So when tragedy struck in our community and the mayor of our town was tragically and brutally shot and killed, people in the community, particularly some of the mayor's family, asked me to consider running for mayor.
Vilsack ran and won, becoming the mayor of Mount Pleasant, Iowa, kick-starting his political career. From there, he became a state senator and then served as the Hawkeye State's governor for 2 terms.
You always know whose side he's on. Tom Vilsack for governor.
Before launching a bid for president in the 2008 cycle.
I'm running for president today to replace the anxiety that we feel today and replace it with the hope of tomorrow.
But had to drop out by February 2007, not even making it to the Iowa caucus.
It is clear to me that we would not be able to continue to raise money in the amounts necessary.
But the guy who eventually won the party's nomination, and later the presidency, took a liking to Vilsack.
To lead a Department of Agriculture that helps unlock the potential of a 21st century agricultural economy, I can think of no one better than Tom Vilsack.
Ultimately, Vilsack became President Obama's longest-serving cabinet member and was praised as U.S. agricultural exports reached record highs in 2014. But by the end of Obama's second term, Vilsack felt his job was done. In a 2016 article, The Washington Post quoted him saying, "I just sometimes think rural America is a forgotten place," and, quote, "There are days when I literally have nothing to do." Vilsack reportedly told Obama he wanted to resign in 2015, but Obama refused and tasked him with a new mission, overseeing the administration's opioid crisis in rural America.
We want to make sure the next generation of healthcare providers are not working under the misapprehension or misunderstanding that these opioids are not addictive.
Overdose deaths involving opioids continued to spike in 2016, but that trend had been in motion long before Vilsack's year-long mission to curb the epidemic. On the 2020 trail, Vilsack was one of the most coveted endorsers in Iowa and backed Biden.
From the very first minute, on the very first day, Joe Biden can begin the process of repairing the credibility that's been destroyed by President Trump, restoring our reputation, rebuilding the capacity of this great country to be the global leader we want it to be.
It's rare to see a cabinet official return to a role in a different administration. Despite his experience, this nomination has faced criticism.
And some people said he was not as sympathetic to your organization and black farmers as he should have been.
Absolutely correct, Ro. And I want to go on record and say Tom Vilsack gave me a very, very hard time on all of those settlements. The Black Farmer Settlement, the Women Settlement, the Hispanic Settlement, and the Native American Farmer Settlement that all was on that bill that I addressed earlier. Secretary Vilsack wasn't on the Hill helping me.
Activists hope to reform the USDA to better help low-income Americans, but they worry Vilsack favors large corporate farm interests, especially given his role as CEO of the U.S. Dairy Export Council. In 2009, Vilsack was confirmed by the Senate unanimously, but now 12 years later, he might face a tougher road to the cabinet with opposition from progressives in his own party.
When Abraham Lincoln established the Department of Agriculture, he called it the People's Department. I look forward to making good on that moniker for all people as we build back better.